Welcome back to the show. Today's topic, relationships. So, just to get started and not go into a dialogue or, just not to have a soliloquy, if you will, of why I'm going to talk about politics. One of the just a header that I put on my notes was like setting boundaries and communicating in relationships, which is the overall message that I want to portray throughout this podcast. So, if you're not familiar with the podcast, or this is your first time listening, as far as when the recording of this, I have it set up where I'm going in steps, or I'm recording it as far as a progression of how to meet a woman, and then as of right now, the podcast that I'm recording up to relationships. But we're gonna finish off with the end of the relationships, either next podcast or a couple podcasts following after this one, just so when people hear it could go from, like I said, when you meet someone, hopefully not to the end of the relationship, but it's going to take you from every step up to the end of a relationship and when you move on. But I want to concentrate now. The podcast I did before that was just entering a relationship, and one of those things that or the main idea, or the overall message of that podcast was setting boundaries, right? Making sure that what your expectations going into the relationship are going to be, and that they are expressed clearly to the other person, and you guys have a, I'm not saying like a come to let's sit down and talk about these serious issues. Like I said, it should be a natural, progressive, deliberate approach to it, for sure, in a way that you bring it up in certain events, allowing for an opportunity to bring some of these subjects up, maybe in a dinner date, maybe when there's some downtime. uh Maybe you guys are at Disneyland and are at that what is that, the little train that takes you to the park. Maybe not talk about deep, some of the serious, uncomfortable, well, maybe not uncomfortable, more embarrassing aspects of them. But you could definitely, tap into some stuff and bring stuff up when you have them. The point being is that there's going to be opportunities to communicate your boundaries, your expectations leading into a relationship, and accepting being in a monogamous or whatever you define as a relationship, being able to get into that whole thing. And it really doesn't change in the early stage of the relationship. Um in the relationship, a lot of people call that the honeymoon stage, right? And I'm not gonna put like timelines, whether it be a few months, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. I'll get into a little bit of about just the length in relationships and how we view them. But as far as what is considered a relationship, that debate is meaningless to me, because it there's there's a lot of variations of what a relationship is, or just the length of it is, to how long and whatnot. I've seen relationships that have been 10 years with no substance and just an empty shell. And I've seen loves or relationships that are like 6 months to a year that are just I wanted to say like a wonder wind, but that's not even a word. Like a dream, almost like they happen, and everything was just so hard. They love hard, they experience hard, and they broke out. Like a match, it starts up, really fast, and it burns really hot, but it dies out really hot too, and really passionately, or not with a match. It just kind of just it fizzles out. But you get the idea that it's just something that is just so passionate, and it's really short. And I've seen some of those that are life changing, and through that experience, it led them to more beautiful things. So there's not really, I don't like setting timelines as far as like what is a relationship and the type of the amount of time to be classified as a relationship. If you think you're in a relationship and both of you guys know that you guys are in a relationship, and if it lasts like 5 days and you consider that a relationship, cool. If you consider that after 2 months, then that's your priority. Then, you do you. Early on in the relationship, or getting back on point, early on in the relationship, you have this honeymoon zone. Normally, unfortunately, the way we go about this is we don't set these boundaries and expectations and express what we want before we become monogamous. So when we get into it, a relationship, we get into the same honeymoon stage early on in the relationship, we're still gonna even be more foggy in our way of seeing things, in the way we move throughout this relationship, right? And it sets the tone for just the upcoming disaster, unfortunately, that occurs more often than not in relationships that we see around us today. And many of us, I'm sure I could ask everyone, hey, have you ever seen a relationship that's toxic? It might be yours, it might be your friend, it might be your sisters, your brother, your cousins, your best friend, whatever. But a lot of people know a lot of relationships that shouldn't be together. And so when we enter into these relationships early on, like I said, we're in this honeymoon stage, and because we didn't set the healthy boundaries, we're still just kind of blocked from realizing the flaws in the other person. And then we start floating into, again, whatever the middle, quote unquote, of your relationship is, or just time in relationship. And once the honeymoon stage starts to go away, then some of these stuff starts becoming a little bit more clear. They start coming up to the surface. You start noticing more. And again, this is not even bringing in living together. This is just, we're in a committed relationship. We're still in our two different places. Once you start living, which is another aspect, and it's probably going to be the point of my next podcast, just as far as the relationship and living together, because there's two relationships, right? You could become monogamous and still have your own apartments. Maybe one person lives with their parents, both people live with their parents, or both have their own apartment. And then after a certain time within that relationship, it leads into that more serious relationship, as far as, hey, now we're going to share a life together. And there's definitely a progression. I think I've said it before. If not, I'll say it again. I think like 2 years minimum should be the amount of time you should be dating someone before you even decide to move in. I'm just writing a little note on my pad. I don't want to get sidetracked too much to try to carry on a conversation while I'm just trying to write a note. So then these things become more bothersome. Depending on our mindset, we could think, oh, well, this is just a feeling, it'll go away, or it could feed into some kind of tapped anger or resentment, that it just starts to, then you notice something else, and then you notice something else, and then you notice something else. Then people start getting mad, start being a little disrespectful, start being, I wanted to say uncognizant, and I should just say that they don't realize what they're doing most of the time. There's some people that know exactly what they're doing, but I think those are probably in the minority. But I think unconsciously we just start becoming disrespectful because we lose that investment, and a lot of people think about investment in financial terms, but just the emotional and mental investments are just as could take a toll just as much, and are just as much of causes of relationships ending as anything else. So anyway, we start getting into the quote unquote, like I said, the middle, and all these flaws are coming in. And because we started off with no communication, and then we pass through the honeymoon stage, or we enter into a monogamous relationship, and We know there was no communication, no red flags were seen, or not, none of that stuff was discussed. And then you start noticing these things in the middle of your relationship, and you're still not discussing them because maybe, like I said, you might think they're gonna fix themselves. Maybe you don't want to bother someone. Maybe you're just misreading the situation, and then they just keep on piling up to the point where you just, I mean, it's like a balloon. You can only put so much water into a balloon before it pops. And it's the same thing. And that's when you have these blow up fights that many relationships, more than you want to acknowledge, end after this huge blow up. Some of them calm down. They might forgive each other, kind of, or they might, have a mutual outburst, and then they let that energy off. They stay together, and then they start that becomes a cycle. They build up pressure, they explode. They build up pressure, they explode. They build up pressure, and that's when you have these relationships that people say they vacillate. They, just they're always fighting, and sometimes it could lead to like those weird ones where they break up and get back together, break up, get back together, break up, get back together. It's that same thing. Like nothing really gets accomplished. It's just a toxic cycle they like. But anyways, so because there was no boundaries, again, that's when you start leading into length of relationships that last for years, months, years, decades, that are toxic, unhealthy, and last that because they again they never started with a set standard. This is what my wants are, this is what my expectations are, this is what I look for in my woman, and none of that stuff was established. And throughout the relationship, it just kept on going. So then once you pass that middle ground and you have that blow up fight, so you're having these blow up fights, it's only leading to a type of exit. It just depends how far down the line you go there, because I mean, I've seen people fix it. Of course, you need a, whether you need therapy, whether you need self therapy, whether you need whatever it is that you need. I'm not here to debate what you need. I've seen people go through therapy, save their relationships, go to counseling and save their relationships, talk to friends and save their relationship, and the list goes on to save it. But I've also seen it the other way, where you could do the same thing someone did and it ends up in divorce. It ends up in separation. And this is not even I know I said divorce and I haven't mentioned shit about marriage because that's a susceptible thing, but well, not a susceptible thing. It's an individual thing, and what you believe and what your religious upbringing is, what you want, I guess, out of life. So I really don't care as far as like marriage. But it leads to divorce. What I care about marriage is just the suicide rate among men, and not even that, just the way men are treated after a divorce. But again, that's a subject for another day. So when you have that kind of miscommunication and lack of boundary setting and standard giving and kind of that understanding, it's only going to lead to a breakup. And of course, when you see all these things, it leads to the what we see in culture now, right? This glorification of a toxic, like, oh, move on, and oh, he wasn't good for you. Like, you see it definitely, like, as far as us men, we see it a lot on our social media feed, on our Facebook, of how men ain't shit, about how he did me wrong, about how use him for his this and use him for his that. If he ain't doing this in the relationship, leave him. So I mean, as men, we're fighting an uphill battle, to especially for men that want to have a relationship, that want to have that intimacy in a relationship. We see that a lot on our social media feeds, and it affects with our psyche, no matter what people want to tell me. I mean, the studies and the science kind of point to that, just because, I mean, how could it not be with the amount of time we spend on social media? And when we see a post, about, oh, if he don't do this and if he don't do that, he ain't sis, move on, sis. And if you're young and impressionable, where we don't have your standards and your foundation right, you might switch, and you might start trying some of this stuff out, which is one of my arguments about just who is leading our youth, and not even just who is leading our youth, just the men that are the quality of men that are leading our youth. And again, I'm not saying that I'm the quality of men that should be leading the youth. I'm just saying the message that is out right now and who is leading our youth is a problem, and it's why I brought this or why I started talking into a mic and addressing some of these men issues that I feel are just being misguided. So anyways, small digression there. But anyways, so it leads into the end of relationship, and just it leaves a bad taste about relationships. And then when we go into the next one, we carry some of the old garbage into the new one. And that's the kind of role that normal, or that's just what we consider a normal relationship now, which is sad. And relationships are in a sad state. The statistics, whether it's marriage, relationships, and whatnot, anything, it doesn't point well, and it's not going in a wow. It's trending in a healthy, productive manner. No, it's heading into a more toxic, vengeful, and hateful way. Away. And even just, I mean, I'm not going to get into age and what's considered a healthy long or what. I mean, I am going to get into what we consider now, just so you could see. I mean, at least in my reality, is what I see is considered long. So a relationship, whether it's from you meeting the woman to the dating and the moving in together and the breakup, is 2 to 5 years. Whether you have kids or don't have kids, the money that you spend together, it doesn't matter. On average, a relationship is 2 to 5 years. I just want you to grab that and understand that. So that's the average that people are having relationships in. So that, let's just take the high road. Let's say you're dating from 20 to, I don't know. I mean, if you're dating that long, it would probably be a problem. I was going to say like 60. That means you were like a lifetime bachelor. But even if you just take that, the amount of relationships you would have had, and if you don't correct a toxic behavior, or if you don't focus on healing a part of you that maybe needed to be, dealing, and you're perpetuating the same bad effects. And, you could say the same thing for the good effects. You have to take it the same with the bad, the same with the good. But when we have good, it doesn't affect, it creates healthy, it creates wealth, it creates people around us that have the best intentions for us. So, we hope we are in that good part. But when it leads into that negative, I mean, you're just going to have a ton of relationships. And of course, you're going to develop a bad taste for women, because if all your relationships are lasting 5 years and they're ending, and you're having this toxic of, oh, yes, romance is beautiful. Oh, it's great. Oh, I didn't recognize the signs and she cheated on me, or and then the next one happens. And then the next one, oh, she was dating me and she just used me for my money. And so you no matter what the hurt was, you're just repeating it, and then you end up having a sour, and you end up, for some or most men, they settle. For others, they don't want to deal with women. But it's kind of sad that they're just average, and they're getting shorter. I think one of the studies, and I didn't want to quote that study. Oh, I don't quote studies. You could Google and do the search if I need to. Once, and I see comments and stuff of like, hey, where's your sources? Then I'll put them. But it's these sources aren't like I'm digging through too much, because if I gotta dig through something, I mean, I'll dig enough where I'll find some, and if it's a statistic that I feel has to be said, I'll say it. But you could Google that, but one of the studies said that, and I agree. All the studies say relationships are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Eventually, we're just gonna have relationships being 6 months to a year. And maybe in the dating world, that's a good thing, right? If you're dating and it lasts for 6 months to a year, maybe that's good, because it shows healthy rotation and people being more diligent on on what their expectations, and maybe like a boundary was crossed and you're like, okay, that's it for me. But for relationships being but then the point being is that some of these, or the example that I was trying to make, is that all of these surveys and studies have shown, or are showing, that it's getting even lower. And two studies that suggested that it was, like I said, a 2 to 3 years was average relationship. And I was like, whoa, that's way too short. And it's probably more accurate. So I'm giving myself 2 years of error. So that's why I went 2 to 5 is considered average. And you see that a lot in Hollywood marriages and relationships. They last anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And then 5 to 10 years is considered long. Like when you hear someone, oh, yeah, I've been with this person for 10 years, like, wow, that's a long time, because you subconsciously, you might think of a decade. 10 years, you think of, wow, just 10 years is 10 years. It's a long time to be with someone. But now we consider that 10 to 20 years, you get that, whoa, that weird reaction when you hear that, yeah, we've been together 20 years. You're like, what? 15 years, what? How did you do that? How did you make it work? And that question becomes, is said a lot, because most of us fall between that 2 to 5 year range. So for us to think, wow, that's, for me, that would have been like 4 girls. You know what I mean? Not for me personally, but I'm saying in generality and in averages, you would be like, whoa, that's 4 girls for me, and you managed to just stay with one girl for 20 years. Like, how is that possible? And don't even get me again with the 30 to, if you're with someone for 20 to 30 years, and I'm someone for 30 years, the likelihood is not only those people are gonna last and are gonna stay together until one of them dies. And yes, I know that people separate at an older age too, but statistically speaking, it's really, really low. It's only between certain age range where it spikes up, obviously, like I said. And just in the progression of how we react to the ages, when you hear, yeah, I've been with this person for 20 years, just the fact that it takes you back a bit, and you're like, wow. And just because that's not common. And when you hear someone say, yeah, I've been with this person for 30 years, you're like, oh, that's that forever love. You see how that switches. It becomes, we go from, whoa, the unobtainable, 20 years, that's crazy to me, to, oh my God, that's like that's your forever love. That's so cute. So because it becomes from the unobtainable to the fantasy, where we live in the reality 2 to 5. Yeah, it's average. I've dated, I've been in, I've had 2 girlfriends in the last like 2 years, whatever, it's average. And then when you say like, oh, I've been with my boyfriend or my wife for 10 years, like, whoa, that's pretty long, That's where we live in. That's the reality of what our current relationship status would be if we could post it on one of our social medias. And that's where we land on right there. And for me, it's a very sad state of affair, because you have just a lot of unhealthy damage people. And I'm saying that in a podcast where I'm not putting any statistics as far as how many people are toxic or how many people are damaged. But it's fairly clearly, I could probably, make an argument to the contrary, but it'll be difficult. Just the amount of people that have resentments, the amount of people that are walking around with unresolved issues from past relationships, past hurts, past betrayals. And I'm guilty of it too. I think we all are. And it's a struggle, but it's something that we shouldn't be struggling with, because we should have healthy boundaries and expectations. So if you go with setting healthy boundaries, and I know you might think she's gorgeous and cute, but yo, if she doesn't check off every box that you have before you even meet her, you should have what your expectations, what your ideal woman should be, and she has to check them all off. Am I saying some you can't? Maybe she checks half of them, and maybe she won't check all of them off, but she has to check off more of the important ones. If loyal, what's important to you? Like for me, it might be loyalty, dependability. It might be that I want her to be focused on fitness. It might be that, some of those things, right? And maybe I also like her to like wear pink or wear high heels. But maybe I meet this, a woman in 2 months from now, and she doesn't. She checks off on the fitness and the core values. What I said, but maybe she doesn't like wearing heels. Am I gonna not proceed? No, I could care less about the heels. The heels are a material thing, and I could probably get most likely, more than likely, bypass that. Maybe she'll do it every once in a while for me. I'll bring it up. Hey, I would love to see you in high heels, but I don't wear high heels that hurt me. Well, maybe we just do it in the bedroom if it, when that conversation. But you could kind of finagle it to where you're getting your, but it's not super important as the fact of the loyalty, dependability, and whatever. If she checks off those three, plus she wears pink but she doesn't wear heels, she's checked enough of them off where you could just proceed. But if she wears heels, wears pink, is dependable but is not loyal, that's a core issue. That's a core problem. Loyalty is a big thing in relationships, and not just in relationships. Well, in any kind of relationship. I was just going to say, not any kind, business, relationships with family, girls, people you interact with. I mean, it's a big thing. So you have to have priorities as to what these boundaries and expectations are in this communication or in this relationship. So if you establish that before you get in there, you already know you have at least a quality, a prospect going in. Then you enter into a relationship. And my suggestion is for men is to let the woman bring it up. Once she brings it up, like, hey, where is this relationship going? Hey, are we ever going to be exclusive? And again, that's what you want. Then you're going to proceed into, obviously she checked off enough. And again, we're going into the second example. Now you've set these healthy boundaries. You've expressed your boundaries and expectations to her. So now she qualified to being your girl. So she asked you and you guys are now exclusive. While entering in this relationship, you've already established it, right? What you expect. So you're going to have to now uphold that. Just telling someone the same way in the dating stuff, if they don't qualify themselves, then you have to disqualify them. You can't just go on to the next step. You just got to say, you know what? This doesn't work for me, and now you have to show me that you're going to requalify for the positions, just like anything. I mean, I don't want to call it like a job application, but like when I applied to be a police officer, and when you apply to become a police officer or any kind of position and you don't get it, let's say you get disqualified through the process of the hiring process. For some places you have to reapply. You have to requalify. Maybe you failed the test, like your driving test. You got to retake the test. You're just not going to start off. Then they're going to say, oh, you failed 26, 28, question 3 and 11. Those are the ones you got to work on. No, you got to do the whole thing, again. So unfortunately, that's what you have to do. So when you enter into a relationship, right, that's not the relationship part, is where you're going to uphold what you told her and she already agreed to. Both of you guys agreed. Same thing, that she should be, through this process. And I'm not negating the woman's part in this and saying she's going to have to do whatever you do, because in the process of you saying, hey, there's going to be a counter offer on her part saying, hey, this and this and this, and you guys should have met in a medium where not only, it should meet both of your needs, where it's a fair, I don't want to say transaction, that just makes it sound so wrong, that it's a fair agreement for both parties. So when you enter this relationship, you're going to have the same honeymoon stage as in the non-setting of boundaries way. But you're going to go at this a whole lot different, of course, because in this middle ground, you're going to enforce. So if something that she agreed to, she doesn't apply by, then you enforce the punishment and say, hey, this is not, ideal for me, because you can't just throw her into, hey, I'm going to only see you, only for a booty call, because it's going to just change the dynamic. And you can't, once you enter into a relationship, and I noticed this with a lot of the advice that uh, men are hearing from relationship coaches and stuff, they treat their relationship, their girlfriend that they're in a relationship with, as if they were still dating, which they're missing that cue. Yes, and it's one of my points. You should definitely continue dating your girlfriend once you become, but that's just part of the next process. Yes, you're gonna, in the beginning, the dating, what you hear a lot is for the dating part, just the courtship part, not when you're in an exclusive monogamous, or not even monogamous, just in a relationship. Like, I don't want to set any kind of parameters as to what you declare a relationship is, or what what you think a relationship is, because it varies from people to people, and I'm always surprised when people declare a relationship. But you hear that mistake where they hear it because they don't know, so they start using dating tactics and relationship tactics, and it just doesn't work. Because again, let's say you enter into this, in a healthy way, you set all the boundaries and all that stuff, so you do have a quality of woman, but just like all of us, we're all human, we're fallible. So she messes up, and you can't just go with even the advice that I gave you and said, oh, just throw her into home dates and we're just gonna Netflix and chill and fuck, because then she's gonna trust me, it's not gonna benefit her either, because now she's just coming over to fill your needs, chill, watch your shows, and fuck. You're not even trying to date her. And when you have already agreed to be in a monogamous relationship, or again, I keep on saying monogamous, when you enter in a relationship and you come up with boundaries, and if, again, every relationship is different, so maybe it does work for some people in that kind of aspect, but for most it won't, because you're going to want to have experience. No one wants to just have a life of dulcacy and the same monotonous things. At least that's not the norm, but there's different things you do in a relationship. So if a woman doesn't she violates a boundary, then this is where the communication aspect comes in with, hey, you know what, I don't think that was cool, the way you responded to me, the way you treated me, the way you talked to someone, the way you did X, Y, and Z. And you address it, she brings it, and hopefully you come up with a conclusion that both of you guys agree with, and you move on. So there's no kicking down step. It's all you're gonna do is communicate. So when a boundary happens, when she crosses your boundary, you address it. There's that, I don't want to say fighting, because it shouldn't be a fight. If you're in a healthy relationship, it should be a discussion, and both sides get their points across if they're valid, and you agree on a solution, and you move on, and you're gonna just keep it in that. Obviously, how many times someone steps a certain boundary is up to you. For me, it's different than it would be for you. So for me to say, hey, if she crosses it 3 times, boot the bitch, it would be irresponsible for me, because I don't know what the dynamics of your relationship is. But there's a certain point that you need to know that this is not going to fix itself. I brought it up in so many ways that now it's becoming a disrespectful action towards me, and you have to recognize, and that's when you have to lead it into, you have to end it. You just go from that, because obviously you've already addressed it enough, you've already brought it up, there's been enough conversations, and if you don't end it, she's gonna look at you in a certain manner, then now she could get away with that. She doesn't have to deal with that aspect of it, and that no matter how many times she crosses that particular boundary you have, that it's not really a boundary, because she's getting away with it. You're not putting her in her, and I'm not saying put in her place like physical violence or anything like that, or being a certain way attitude wise, or showing some kind of actions, is that, hey, you're not standing up for yourself and having enough respect for yourself, saying, hey, this is a boundary that I have, and you keep on crossing it, and I've tried to do the adult thing, and I care about you a lot, and I brought it up to the attention, because it's seriously one of those things that is just getting under my skin, and is one of the things I won't tolerate, and you just won't listen to me, so we have to break up, you have to move out. whatever. Again, that's why I give 1 or 2 years, so you don't have to have all this stuff where you move in together too quick and then you excuse it as saying, hey, we live together, so now we have to last longer or stay longer with each other. And that's what, that, 2 year minimum should be. I said 1 to 2 year, but it really should be 2 years of healthy dating and healthy progression and healthy courtship that leads into the relationship. And again, in this aspect, when you're in the healthy part, but she habitually, line steps or crosses that boundary, you have to be strong enough in your own will and in your own conviction to end it if no correction is doing it. But in a healthy relationship, once you're in it, you're going to vacillate from that honeymoon state to the middle of the relationship where you start seeing flaws and they start affecting you. And I like to call this the kind of just rejuvenate your relationship. That means that maybe you're doing everything great. You're going out to dinners, you're going out to, parties, or, you're being social together, you're taking trips. But even that becomes monotonous, right? You could have, I mean, just look at just social media and some of these influencers that are out there. They have some of the most exciting lives, but they fall in this routine. Oh, we went to Thailand. Oh, we went to China. Oh, we went to this. And at some point, that to them, just like us going to work or going to the mall or going to the same restaurant, it becomes monotonous to us. So you have to kind of switch it up. You have to not reinvent yourself, but reinvent your relationship as far as what you're used to. That's when you step out your box a little bit. When you're getting too comfortable, or it might be going great, but you notice maybe it's becoming too predictable. You have to then be able to go outside the box. And that's what some females, you hear them and say, oh, he's exciting, he keeps me on my toes. It's not because he's always doing this. I hate, and this is going to be on a side note, I hate when I hear people using characters from fucking movies as to dictate anything in how people should be in the normal way. Oh, well, I saw this movie, and this is the way men should be, and this is the way this other, this movie, and this is characteristics of. No, they're movies. They're for entertainment, and it pisses me so you're basing your whole theory basically off of fictional characters that didn't exist, that lived in a guy's head or a woman's head and wrote it down on the script. Get the fuck out of here. Just how to say, miss me with that. Just go away. I don't need to hear any of what you have to say if that's the basis of your argument. Oh, but just like Rocky didn't exist. I mean, Rocky Marciano, the boxer, did exist, but Rocky Balboa, the one you see portrayed by Sylvester Stallone, that's strictly to the movies. So when I hear people the Rocky Balboa thing, or when they they take that running up and that's the motivation, I'm like, dude, that's like I'm glad you're getting the motivation from it, however you get the motivation, but it's false motivation on a false premise. And if I'm gonna get angry for one section of the group doing it, I'm gonna get mad I'm gonna get mad throughout the board because it's bothersome. But sorry, that's just a little side tangent that it gets, and I'm gonna bring that up in just a podcast by itself. And I have these the way they use movie quotes and characters in movies as to dictate how a man should be, or a relationship that someone saw on a movie or on a show. Oh, look, this is the way a relationship. Get out of here. Really? You're gonna take it off of a movie? And some of these influencers and therapists and doctors are making tons of money with this ridiculous. Anyways, so back to the point. So you're going to just want to try to add extra sizzle, extra spice. And that's what's going to cause you to have a healthy, long relationship where people are going to come up and you're going to be in that that wow range and that forever love range. Most of the time, sadly, no, because we see some of those people that last 20 years or 30 and 40 years for a small minority, not a lot, but there is a lot, actually. I shouldn't say small minority. For a lot of them folks, they settled. It was easier just to be with someone than to have standards and wait for that perfect person. Sadly, I've talked to enough old people where I've I talked to an old man where his wife died, but when he was talking about his wife, it was like within 20 minutes. And then I'm like, I asked him a question about if there was a love in in his life in the past that he did, and he just got stuck on this one female, and we talked for like an hour and a half, and I was like, whoa, there, this is the woman that he probably is was in love with since the moment he met this woman. And you could just hear it in his conversation and his mannerisms and the way he spoke about it. And that's really sad that you settle for another life less than what you wanted. And don't get me wrong, you get kids and grandkids and a good life, but not the great life, not the life that you wanted. And it's so sad. It's sad for women and men, but again, this show's for men. It's just sad for men when I hear that. And when I heard this from this man, it was sad. I mean, it put things in my life into perspective as to what kind of quality of people were around me, and how the lack of me enforcing some of my boundaries will dictate the quality of my life. And it became scary. And at such an older age to realize that as a male is just wrong. And I realized it because I realized that it's because male figures in my own personal life, but just even the message that popular culture and influencers or celebrities are putting out there, or at least I know there's some. I don't want to say there's none, but it's not the majority of that. And until something happens to you, whatever that is, then you start on your seeking process, and you learn this stuff, sadly, after heartbreak or after a traumatic event is when most stuff happens to everyone. And yes, there's a beauty to that. There's a process to that, but too many are going through this process unneedingly, not needing to do this, because if the correct information was out there, I believe humans are smarter than people portray them on social media. I think we're a lot smarter than people give us credit to, or credit for. But if we don't have that information to digress it by ourselves, because the information that's out there is the opposite, or the wrong information, or the popular information, you're gonna dissect the wrong information as opposed to the right information. It's super, like, again, it's just super important to have conversations about what a healthy relationship is. And have I been in some healthy relationships? That's a story for another day. Have I been in bad relationships? I think all of us have, 1,000%. All of us have. But anyway, so the part that I'm in, or the part that I'm getting to, is that for a healthy one, you're gonna want to vacillate, reinvent yourself, rejuvenate the spark between when you get into the middle relationship, and you're gonna just kind of vacillate from that honeymoon stage to throwing a little sass in it. And that's gonna cause you, like I said, to go into these 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years and dying together relationships. And even if you enter in this relationship, like I said earlier, if she crosses or doesn't correct the behavior that is a deal breaker from you, that's when you have to separate, you have to divorce, you have to follow in the footsteps of correcting that behavior. Hopefully, within this process, you won't marry someone that you're gonna have to then miscommunicate, because why is it going to be so easy? People might be thinking like, well, it's not going to be easy from that honeymoon stage to keep on doing that. You're right, it's not. That's why relationships takes work. But if both parties are communicating in a healthy way, and expectations are being done, the courtship is being handled correctly, arguments are handled appropriately with the correct volume and with the low amounts of them. Like, you should never be arguing consistently. That is you could do that, but getting to that point, you might have the greatest communication. Expectations might be on point. The courtship, you might be doing everything great, You might have no fights, zero fights. And guess what? That's still, having all of that done still leads to divorce and separation. It's a lot smaller. The stats on that are a lot lower, but it does happen. Just because you're doing everything correct doesn't mean you grow apart. And I hope that makes sense to people, because I've seen it. I've seen people, and you don't hear it. You don't hear about these stories a lot because, again, oh, they split up and it was so wonderful that no drama happened, and now they've moved on. That's not as great as, oh, she took him for all his money, and oh, she did this, because we like to get those crazy stories and put them out there because they grab views, right? I mean, I hope no one's dumb enough to well, maybe I should take that back, because it seems that we're not smart enough to not know that that's not the normal, because there's a lot more examples of the correct way, where everything was done correctly, the courtship, everything was done, and it's just people that grew apart without time. That grew apart through time or with time, and that's perfectly okay. No one is here with someone as their forever, no matter what it is. And I know there's men out there and women out there that go, I did everything right, and he still left me, or we still separated, and it wasn't because of cheating or this or money. It's like I said, the values might have changed, viewpoints on religion might have changed. I don't know. I do know, but there's a lot. The part that I do know is that there's a lot of variables. So many variables. Even if you have a healthy communicative relationship, it still can lead to divorce and separation and just normal relationships. Once you have the full cycle of healthiness, even in that example of a healthy start, a healthy courtship, she qualified herself, boundaries were respected, communication between, and it went into that, always good, always smiling, laughing. You can still end up separated. It could still be that way to you, end of a relationship. But when you end it in that, and you say, hey, we're just growing apart, and because the communication is going to be there, both parties will see it, and you grow apart. And that's when you have these stories where, like, what, like, this is ridiculous, like, it can't be that way, like, this doesn't exist. These are the rare ones, and it's not. More people than we want to acknowledge have this way of ending a relationship because they have that healthy boundary. I was going to get into a social with minority, low income stuff like that, but that's the story for how we focus on that. And that's how some of these numbers that we kind of get mad about or becomes a trending thing is always in those kind of, anyways, I don't want to get into that. I will eventually, but that's the thing. Like I said, that subject right there is just, it needs so much more time than I am willing to devote towards the end of this podcast. So anyways, again, just because everything's perfect, you have to take that with just life. Nothing's forever. There's always a possibility. You could have the greatest job, the greatest career, the greatest relationship, the greatest whatever. There's still a possibility that could fail. It could stop working. It could break down. It could separate. It could do whatever. You could lose your dream job. You could do, there's just so many variables. But when you end it in a healthy way, you're going to go into the next relationship in a healthy way because you realize that, hey, this is just the way it goes. And that's the message that needs to be echoed. That's the message that needs to be yelled at. That's saying, hey, we need to have a healthy start, a healthy middle, and a healthy end. So then when we go into the next relationship, we're going in with a healthy mindset and continue that healthy way. So then when the people that we leave behind us, we don't leave hurt, broken people. We leave healthy people that are now going to go on their journey. So then instead of having maybe one person because they did it their way, whatever, they didn't care and broke someone and destroyed someone, you only have one person that it's in reality is not really all that healthy and and okay, and he or she, in this instance we'll just say she, it's a man, she moves on, right? And she goes on, and then you end up being broken. So then you go to your next relationship and perpetuate whatever happened to you in that way. And she just continues her way because, depending on what kind of stuff is in her mind, she might not, or she might think something's wrong with her, whatever the situation was. But she's going to continue that toxic way of her ways in her new relationship. So then after that, because nothing was corrected, you're gonna have 4 unhealthy people, and you see the virus effect that this has, where you're just perpetuating the same horrible things because you won't stop and have standards and have a certain criteria that people have to, an expectation that you have, a boundary that no one must set, a standard that must be upheld. You won't do that, and we perpetuate this stuff. Whereas if 2 people start healthy, and you go through all that vetting process, the relationship was communicative and healthy, and the breakup was communicative and healthy, you're just going to go into the next relationship even that much better. So instead of a virus effect that is a negative effect to society, you create a positive effect that can then be emulated by more and more people that are around us, that see us, that say, wow, wasn't Becky or wasn't Ricky over here with someone, wasn't, Edward here, with someone, wasn't Mike here with someone, and wow, look at how amazing both of them are after the breakup. Wow, and then you have these conversations. What happened? Oh no, we had great. We talked about it and we just grew apart. We wanted different things and da 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 da. But in a healthy way, you hear those kind of remarks. Oh, we just separated because we wanted different things. In a whole, you hear it as a cover-up story, not actually the truth. Where I want that to be the truth, where we move into just having healthy relationship because we have that healthy boundary, allowing time to do what time does. And what time does is it exposes things, it brings stuff to light. You can't, time is our greatest friend, our greatest ally. We use it, and if we in this way with relationship aspect, we need to use time as men to our advantage, because it's going to only reveal, as long as we're set in who we are as men and have our priorities straight, our standards and everything and so on, when we get ready to, we're just gonna be able to take people off. Like, nope, yes, it's easier. You have your list, you have your you have to pass this much, or else we're not hanging out as friends. I'm not going into business with you. I'm not going to be in a relationship with you. I'm not giving you kids. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm, so on and so forth. But that's only going to happen when you develop some standards. I don't want to cuss, but as men, we don't have standards. Again, nothing to do with physical or what, just standards as loyalty, what lies, whatever is important to you. Again, I know I want to say a bunch of stuff, but what's important to me is not important to you, and is not important to the other person listening to this. So it has to be on whatever you deem it, but have some standards and enforce them. It's just the way it has to be. But what I wanted to do is making sure that setting of the boundaries and the communication is in place, again, leading into a relationship. And once the relationship's in there, that both the communication is in there. And as men, we have to be able to understand that when we communicate stuff, she's going to communicate stuff back to us. And again, depending on what you want, whether you want to get married, whether you want to have kids, whether you want to move in together, whether this person has more qualities than good qualities and bad qualities, you are going to have to grab some of that information that she's telling you and somehow adapt it into your, standards in a way that it's not violating your morals, your standards, your boundaries, but it's acknowledging that, hey, this person has these many qualities that are positive and I want to continue with her. So in the benefit of making this relationship better, I'm going to adapt certain mannerisms, maybe adapt certain standards that, like, kind of like a constitution, there might be, or a law, there might be a law, but then there's an amendment to that law. You're going to have to start making amendments to your laws because you want this person in your life. And because the communication was healthy and you found valid what her points were, and you found a lot of stuff like, hey, maybe I did see this ring incorrectly. Maybe I do go to the same Chinese restaurant. Maybe I do, just want to go out for restaurants because I like to eat a lot. Maybe I don't, oh, she wants to go to the zoo. All right, I don't like the smell of animal, poop, but for her, I'll do it. That'll be something, I'll try it out. That's a very healthy thing to do. I know the zoo part was probably a stupid example, but it's what came up right now. So you have to have amendments because, again, no one's perfect and there's no right way. There's no, hey, follow this and it's going to lead to this. There's no such thing. Even in my thing, I think I said it throughout the whole podcast of how to progress states. That is literally as basic as I could put it. And then I think through the whole podcast, I kept on saying it's adaptable. You could scale it up. You could scale it down. You could do this. You could do that. You could vary it from it. But there's no way that I was going to say, yeah, follow this and you're going to end up getting a girlfriend. The basis of even that part of it was having standards and disqualifying women from the moment you meet her to the moment that she asks you to be her girlfriend, because you want quality. And I'm sick and tired of men settling and not choosing, not disqualifying. I don't care how bad she is. Oh, I got me a baddie. I do not care. If she tells you that she has a problem with loyalty, boop, red flag. If she tells you that she likes to drink and get blacked out drunk, boop, red flag. If you choose then to ignore those red flags and continue on a relationship path, and I'm talking about myself, of course, because I could only call myself dumb. But I think most men will agree that all of us, and not only men, I think women too, we are all just guilty of that, because for women be like, oh, he's cute and maybe I won't get someone like him, and for us men, like, man, look at her ass or look at her boobs, and yeah, so she's a little psycho, so what, right? The psycho ones are the best in bed, yeah, and we laugh about it as a society, yeah, we give them props, we like them posts, but that's toxic. That's a toxic statement, and you're not looking at your boundaries and you're not upholding them. So again, it's super important if you're going to enter into a relationship, and I'll end it with this. No matter how good the relationship is going to be, it can end. That's just human nature. That's just life. And that's what I want to get to, where if we do end up ending a relationship, that it ends in such a healthy way because the whole relationship was healthy. It's going to take some time. It's not something that is talked about a lot. Like I said, again, no matter what, whether it be the news is negative, the news that, or the posts that we like are always like in this negative trip. I'm not saying we don't like positive ones either, but for the most part, everything negative stuff brings views, brings clicks, brings awareness, I guess, in a weird way. But just communicate. If you're going to get into a relationship, make sure if something bothersome comes up, talk about it, bring it up. If you're with a woman and you enter a relationship and she violates some, again, you're not going to break it off. You're not going to throw her no booty call, because obviously she's gone to that point where she is more important than just a girl you're dating. Now you're exclusive and you're together. You bring it up and she's going to tell you her point and you move on. And if it leads that, if it goes to that both of you guys are leading a different life and going a different way, there's nothing wrong with that, and you end it in a certain way. As long as, like I said, the communication and the boundary setting are in place, it could only lead to a healthy start and middle and hopefully not, but an end. It perpetuates a healthy mindset, a healthy relationship, and a healthy way of going. I know I'm going against the grain because that's not what society tells us. That's not what popular culture tells us. I mean, you could just go on YouTube and do like boyfriend, ex-girlfriend revenge or ex-boyfriend revenge, and just the clicks, and you go down this weird rabbit hole where you just see how the true human nature, and not even true human nature, because I don't think that's even the true human nature, is just what we see around us. And because we see it around us, we become, or we gained a kind of a culture of acceptance around it. So, just talk to each other. If you're going to enter, I'm not saying relationships are for everyone. Just talk to each other. Make sure that if you're feeling it, talk about it. And if you're not feeling it, talk about it healthy, and, live and love hard. If that's what you want to do. But just make sure that if you're going to enter into a union, because it's still a union, not maybe a marriage, but if you're entering into a relationship, it's a union, and you want to be respectful. And as men, we want to be, gentlemen. We want to be understanding. We definitely want to lead. We don't want to be closed-minded. So when we say, oh, we don't like this, and you overstepped it, and she replies to us, that we just block that out. No. If there might have to be a couple hours of let me listen to you. Never argument. Don't raise your voice. It should be in a level where it's too, just like this, nothing too crazy, like, hey, what you did over there, it just bothered me because X and X, or when we were over here, you did this and I found that disrespectful. I hope you don't do that again. She might say like, oh, I didn't even notice it, or really, you thought that was disrespectful, and you take it from there, hopefully to a healthy conclusion where you guys both agree and move on from that. And I think that's the secret, maybe, to having relationships that last, that make us say wow, and those forever love. So I hope you guys found this, you found something informative in this podcast. Thank you for listening. Share the video, hit the like button or the bell button, whatever it is. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for listening and watching, and until next time.